questions. Okay. And for those of you that are online, if you don't want it recorded, you can turn your screen off. That's fine from that. Okay. So let's go through some of these questions. I'm not going to discuss each question one by one because you guys had a good discussion in your groups. But let's look at some of these sayings that were common. So a penny saved is, what did you guys say? A penny earned, okay? Cash is, okay, what does that mean? Cash is king. Okay.
Cash is king.
Okay, yes, yeah, and so that's what people say is if you have the cash, you can buy things. If I have a card, sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. What about money doesn't grow
On trees.
on trees? Okay. And so some of these are common sayings that we have in Canada or in English, but maybe in your own country or your own language, there might be sayings that are similar or that people teach with each other. Okay. It is difficult to get. What was this one? Any guesses?
Money.
Money. Okay.
Money.
Money. So difficult to get money. And then the last one on this slide, go to school, get a good education, work hard at a
Job.
okay, and have a good
Reputation.
Reputation.
have a good life, or if you look at the future, have a good retirement. So these are all common sayings that I guess I'm standing in front of the screen there.
Retirement.
Okay, so these are all common sayings that some of us grew up with or that are commonly taught. But in the last 20 years, because of this device, and I'm showing this device, but our whole world has made some changes with technology and with things being bought and sold online, etc. And so some of these things, for example, one thing that I often hear is you need to save your money. But I've heard in the last 10 or 15 years from some highly educated people, and I believe what they're saying, they say saving is for losers.
Yeah.
And losers is not a polite term. Usually, if you're a loser, that means you didn't win. But I think we're seeing now why they're saying that. Because if you save money in the bank, you have $1,000, you have it set in the bank, how much interest do you get in the bank? Okay, it's going to be very little.
2%.
But with the cost of groceries and gas and other things you've seen over the last few years, it's increasing. So most people that have been taught, I'm going to save my money in the bank and it's safe, they're going to have less and less money over time because of inflation. You want your money to be working for you with investments, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or some way where you're getting more than it just sitting there. I don't know from your experiences. I remember my father telling stories. Some of his brothers or uncles, they would put money into plastic bags and then they would dig a hole in the ground and they would hide the money because that's where it was safe. Okay. But because of our society changing, I think there's some things that we've been taught that are a little bit less common or not helpful now. Same with this, I'm not going to go into a lot of these questions, but, and maybe I should just say a little bit. In 2007, I joined a company to help people get out of debt. So it was a Canadian-run company. Their focus was helping people get out of debt because they realized most people don't have much money for saving for retirement or for insurance or other things that are helpful. So their focus was, how do we get out of debt first? And then how do we help your money grow? So for several years, I did that job. I also was in Indonesia in 2013 to 2016, and I took more than 100 books on money And well, I took 2,000 books with us to Indonesia. I love reading, but I had more than 100 books just on money. And so I love reading and talking about this. And I also almost went bankrupt twice. So I've had very little money in the bank. So that's why, as I talk about it, I love sharing or chatting about money and how money works. So that's some of what I'm sharing with you. So in Canada, there's a high percentage, 70 to 80% of people say they worry about money. There's about 30% that say if they don't get paid the next paycheck in 2 weeks, they will have lots of debt or money problems because they're not having enough money to live month by month. Or for some people, if you're new to Canada, maybe you're also struggling a bit with money because you might not have work or you have a job that it's very low paid. And one of the times I was almost bankrupt was in 2016, because I went from, my wife and son and I were in Indonesia. We moved to Canada and I couldn't get work. And sometimes newcomers say, what do you mean? You're a Canadian. Yes, but even for Canadians, sometimes there's times it's hard. I was working at Shoppers Drug Mart in the evenings, only 3 or 4 days a week. That was the only job I had. And yet before that, before we went to Indonesia, I was teaching at the University of Manitoba for 5 years. I had my master's. So I understand when newcomers say, I have all of this knowledge, I've studied in my country, I come to Canada, I can't get work. It sometimes happens for us in Canada as well. It's how you know people and what jobs or what things you qualify for. So that's where I know about worrying about money, because I've worried about it a lot in my life. Also with debt, do you have debt? Do you have a plan to get out of debt? And the reason I focus a lot on this is my experience has been, and it talks a little bit about different types of debt, but if you have 10,000 or more of debt, not in your mortgage, but credit cards, line of credit, payday loans, any type of debt outside of your mortgage, you probably need professional help. Because the interest rates, even if it's 6% or 10%, you're going to struggle unless you change your money habits to get out of that by yourself. There's only, I think, 2% or 3%, if they have 10,000 or more in debt, that can get themselves out by themselves. You have to talk with someone or ask for advice. I do this for free and for fun, because you're going to meet lots of people that will say, I give webinars, I give seminars. Most of them are employed by a company. And so when you buy something through them, investment or refinance your mortgage or whatever, they're going to get some money. It's not a bad thing. It's how our system works. Same with car sales, same with real estate agents. But you need to listen to advice from people. Why are they giving you some advice? So sometimes people say, well, don't go with Shaw, go with Bell MTS. But then you find out they work for Shaw. So you always question, why are people giving you advice and how helpful is it? So with this and with other seminars, I talked about this with newcomers this afternoon in Transcona. And I said to them, I don't get paid for any of this. I do it for fun and for free. So see which advice you want. If you have questions, I love talking about this and could talk more about this. Let's look at some of these numbers, which I think is a little bit scary. So right now for mortgages, what is the mortgage rate approximately on your house if you have a mortgage?
Mortgage.
I got a mortgage at the
Yep.
time. I got 2.7.
2.7, okay. And is it still at 2.7? Yeah. So a lot of in the last year has gone up to 4 or 5, maybe even 6 for some people, depending on their credit. So that's more than doubled the interest rate. Okay, what about lines of credit? This is usually from the bank where they say, well, you have good credit, we can lend you this money. What's the approximate rate? Does anyone know? Okay, we'll look at the others and then I'll go down and show you. And loans kind of fits in the same area, but usually loans are a little bit higher than a line of credit. Credit cards, what's the interest rate on credit cards in Canada approximately?
18%?
Okay, so 18, yeah, how much?
24.
24? What did you guys say?
He said 36.
Well, up to, yeah, between 18 and 30 or even a bit higher. Okay, and payday loans? Does anyone know what so
100.
loan is where you have your paycheck, you go to them and you say, I need to get some money because I need money right now. Any guesses or ideas?
100%.
25, someone said 100%. Okay, well, let's look at some of these numbers. By going to the next slide. Okay. So mortgages are 4 to 6, lines of credit 6 to 9, loans 6 to 12. Credit cards, yeah, 12, 24, and up to 30, with some depending on your score. Payday loans can be 20 to 60%. By law, you can't go higher than that. But they also have fees on it. So for some people, I've seen, I was helping some people that were very low income. They kept going to the payday loans. And when I read through their documents, the interest was 60%, but there was fees on top. So it was almost 100% within a year, how much they were trying to pay back. So especially when people are trapped in this, but even with these rates, loans or credit cards, it's very quickly to have trouble or struggle with money. Okay,
May I ask,
yes,
why do people go to,
desperation.
why,
So
why can't you cash it?
well, for some, they don't have bank accounts, like for some that are very low income. But for some, they can cash the check at the bank, but they can't borrow more than what's on that check.
And they want to borrow.
They need, yeah, so they're using the paycheck, and this, yeah, maybe this, I'll explain a bit more. So if this is a paycheck and it's for $600, but they need 800 or 900. So then the payday loan company will cash it and keep that money. They will give you the 700 or 800, but now you owe that interest on all of that amount. And for a lot of people I knew, they said, well, my mom is sick in the Philippines. My uncle is trouble in Colombia. My cousin is struggling in, and so it wasn't necessarily that they needed it for groceries, although some did. For some, it was like, well, I need to send to my family back home. And that's why they're taking this, where the banks won't lend them money anymore. Okay. Or for some people with vehicles, and I'll talk about this, I probably won't be tonight, but with vehicles, even on some of the vehicle loans, there's a high rate that we think it should be 5 or 6%, but I've seen some people where on a car loan, they're paying 16 or 18 or 20%. And the trouble with vehicles is prices don't go up, prices usually go down, like the price of or the value, I should say. We'll see. We might not get through most of this tonight, so we'll see if we carry this over if you're interested into next week. So let's look at some of the financial vocabulary. Some of you got to this in your group, some of you didn't, but I want to just go through and give you some of these words and information. So let me just go to the to some of these definitions. Okay, so keep in mind one thing. Most books, dictionaries, the bank and the government, they're going to teach you some information that's different than what I'm teaching you. Because their goal, yeah, as a bank, is a bank here to make money or is a bank here to help you?
To make money for sure.
Make money. And it's okay to make a little bit of money. With my afternoon class, I looked at RBC, Royal Bank of Canada. Let's just take a guess. How much money do you think that RBC made in profit last year? Just so there's about 40 million people in Canada, 38 or 40 million. So for one bank, it's one of the big 5 or 6. How much do you think they made in profit last year?
1 billion?
$1 billion?
Yeah.
Actually,
That's-
that's low. Or because we looked it up. In the 3 months in October, November, December last year, RBC, so just one bank, made 3.8 billion in 3 months. So for the year, they made 10 to 12 billion. So when the bank gives you advice, they say, and I heard it from some of these tables, somebody used the example, an asset is your watch, an asset is your vehicle, an asset is your house. Because that's what our society teaches us. But I want to challenge that, and it's not from me, it's from multiple books I've read. What does this say an asset is? An asset gives you, okay, positive cash flow. Does your car give you money or take money away from you? Take away. Does your house give you money or take it away from you? Usually take it away, and I'll explain why usually, not always. So if you use the bank term of an asset, they will say, oh, you have nice golf clubs and a watch. They're worth $5,000. You can borrow this amount of money. But if you would go to try to sell those, you're not going to get 5,000 for them. And that thing is sitting there, the golf clubs or the watch. So with some financial teachers, they say it's not just having something that's expensive. It's actually a step further. It gives you positive cash flow or positive money. So by this definition, for many people, this is what makes the difference between low income and middle or wealthy people. And I'm not going to say rich, because I have many friends that are rich. They have a nice car or vehicle. They have 2 houses. They take lots of vacations. They also have lots of debt. And that's a difference as well. Just because, I'll tell you a short story. A friend of mine was in Indonesia, and he said, oh, in America, life was good. I had 2 houses, I had 3 vehicles, and there was just him and his wife. I said, why are you back in Indonesia? Oh, we missed the food. We liked Indonesia. It was better in Indonesia. I said, because this was in 2010. What happened in 2008?
Financial
Natural
crisis.
price.
Yeah, there was the mortgage crisis meltdown.
Yeah.
So in 2008, he did have 2 houses and 3 vehicles. All of it was borrowed from the bank. Then he didn't have the income to pay it. As soon as the government or the banks went to take his money back, he went bankrupt. So he was rich, but he was not wealthy. Wealthy is when you have money that's coming in from different assets. And for most of us, that's your job. But I also want to challenge that and say we need more than just your job. Okay, so liabilities takes money away from you. So that's where the bank will say your car is an asset. I don't say see it as an asset. I say that your car, well, but this is what we've been taught. This is what my parents taught me. This is what others around in culture teaches. So this is common what we say. It's just a little bit different than if you want to become wealthy. Okay. Income, where we get some money, expenses are what we pay for money. This one I think is very key with a measure of wealth. Because for, like I said, with rich people, most people say I'm rich. I have a car, I have a house, I have the fancy watch, I have my golf clubs, okay? But with being wealthy, if I didn't work, how many days could I last without money coming from my job? Okay, that's how I see how wealthy we are. So let's say that it costs me $3,000 a month for my expenses, and I have $3,000 in the bank. So that means in 1 month, I will have 0. So I'm wealthy by 1 month. Okay, if it costs me $3,000 a month for my expenses and I have $30,000 in the bank, I'm wealthy by 10 months. Okay, does that make sense with money? So you have to change your thinking or mindset. Just because I have a bit of money in the bank, if it's less than my expenses or I have a fancy car, that doesn't mean that you're wealthy. It just means that you have some possessions, which may or may not be able to make you wealthy. Okay, financially free, so passive income exceeds expenses. I'll talk in more detail about that in the future, tonight or next week. Financial IQ, so this is where our schools fail us. Our banks fail us, our government fails us, and we fail ourselves because we don't try to learn more. So when I see, I'll give you an example. On the street I live, someone was desperate a year ago to buy a house. They found a house, they loved the house. The house was worth 400,000. But when they tried to bid for houses, they were always outbid. They said, we want this house. They paid 480,000 and got the house. That house isn't worth 480,000. So I don't want to say they're stupid, but they are. But a more polite way is to say their financial IQ is low because they're putting a lot of money in something that continues to take money away from them with mortgage and insurance and taxes and those expenses. I bought a house on the same street that's a similar size to theirs. And on that street, average price was 360 to 400,000. I paid 250,000 for my house that's a similar size. Why? The basement has some foundation problems. So families don't want it. We're scared, we're not sure. I fix roofs and foundations. That's some of the knowledge I have. I looked at it and it's one section. Online, you can't really see this, but it's one section in the house that's about this wide. And it's under a secondary section. It's not the main foundation of the house. It's a $10,000 or $12,000 repair. So the knowledge I have from fixing houses allowed me to buy this house for 100,000 or more less than market value. And the person a few houses down that bought the house for 480, he ended up paying 100,000 more. It's not because I'm smarter than him intellectually. Maybe he's an engineer or a physicist or something. But my financial knowledge and IQ is higher than his with money. So let's look a little bit further. This part I was also going to have some discussion, but because of our time, I want to just highlight or look at this. Okay, but let's just take this as a group setting. So how do we usually get money? Where do you get money usually? Yeah.
From the job.
So for most of us, our income is from the job. Okay. Are there other ways where we might get, oh, right. You guys have the, yeah, it's those ones. Where else might you get money from?
On business
Okay,
sometimes.
from a business. So you might have business, maybe sometimes depending on your age, you might have parents that give you some money. Because sometimes if we're just starting out, our parents might give us some. Okay, but usually the job is the main, sometimes a business. So let me jump number 2. Let's just look at number 3. What are common expenses that you have? Every month, where do you spend money?
Grocery, rent,
Groceries, food, mortgage or rent,
car,
Car,
gas,
bus.
insurance.
Transport.
insurance, okay? So lots of different places. If you think of yourself as a bucket of water, so if I'm like a bucket, actually, I have a picture. I don't know if I have it up here or not. Yes, I do. So think of a bucket where there's water that's coming out. Okay, for those of you that are not online, let me just switch the screen so you guys can see this as well. Okay, so if you think of our money or monthly budget as a bucket, it's like there's all of these leaks that money goes out. Okay, and with the newcomers today, we talked a bit about cell phones. Some people are paying $300 or $400 for TV, internet, and 3 phones or 4 phones because they have multiple kids. They have, you know. But I said to them, when did you switch to a new provider last? Because usually promotions come out. So maybe every 1 or 2 years, if they would switch, they could save $300 or $400 or $500. Anyway, there was something that we had chatted about with that. But think of what we're spending like a bucket or where the money goes. Okay, and let's just look at some of these. What are the biggest expenses we usually have? And I have the answers here. So this is question 4 on your handouts for those of you in person. Okay, taxes, mortgage or rent, food, transportation, and then for some of us, debt payments. Those are usually your 4 biggest areas. Okay, so let's think for a minute. I'll give you a 30 seconds or a minute, not a long time, but how can we make these expenses a little bit lower? Okay, so just think about it for a minute. If you want to talk with 1 or 2 other people, we're not going to go into breakout rooms. But just think in your mind, can I reduce taxes?
No.
Maybe,
Maybe.
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 Okay, mortgage, rent, food, transportation, debt payments. So just think about it for 1 or 2 minutes, talk with 1 or 2 others around you. How can we reduce some of these, or how can we reduce that? Okay, so I'll give you about 30 seconds, so not a long time, but a couple of minutes.
There's so much.
Anything else?
You can reduce your taxes by giving charitable donations.
How would you do that?
30% of that goes against your income. It's down here, it's for your spouse.
Rent, taxes, food, transportation.
If you buy an RSP,
Yeah.
you will always tax it now.
So does anybody in the online group have any ideas? How can we reduce any of these things?
But this will not help you when you are older and you cash it.
Tax,
That's-
maybe, yeah, contribute to RRSP
Yep, good idea.
and
You invest in
food is check your like a fridge and pantry before go to grocery shopping and make a shopping list.
transportation.
That is such a good idea because there is so much food waste in
Yeah.
Canada. You know,
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes I, yeah, buy some stuff that I already have my pantry or like a freezy, you know.
Use the bicycle. Yeah.
I agree. I sometimes make food. We have a little saying in my house. We say, "Let's shop at home,"
Yeah,
right? Before we go shopping at the store, let's shop at home and see what we have.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So mortgage is if you have some like extra money, you have to like a prepayment for your mortgage. That is reduced to your total amount of length of the payday.
Right. Yeah, that's a good one too. I mean, sometimes some banks offer ways to double your payments occasionally or make a lump sum payment if you have
Oh,
extra
yeah.
money,
Yeah.
which is funny because a lot of us don't have extra money to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Transportations. I don't have any ideas. I think Mr. Trevor will give us a little advice how to spend not so a lot of money to taxes. It's open small business, yes. Charity, yeah, donation, like
Yeah.
mhm. About rent, it's like smaller house.
Ah,
Downsizing, you mean? Smaller
yes.
house.
Yep.
You know, so one of like a mutual my friend, she has 9 house in here. Wow,
Wow.
it's a lot of. I don't have any idea how to handle this old houses.
No. I know that some people are very loyal to their banks,
Oh,
but the banks aren't always quite so loyal to us, right? So my husband is very good at when we had our mortgage, he would go to our bank and say, "Oh, what interest rate will you give us this time?" And then they would tell him. And then he would go to another bank and say, "Oh, my bank is going to give us this interest rate. What would, would you like our business? Would you like, what could you do for us? But he would shop for, every time we renewed our mortgage, he would shop at different banks. And then he would go back to our bank and say, if we go with this other bank, they're going to do this for us. And often he would get a slightly better rate.
Oh, is it hogging? Kind of.
Pardon?
How can I? Hogging? Oh, I forgot the name. So deal with the price,
Yeah. Oh, yes, haggling. Yes.
Yeah, haggling. I forgot. Yeah, haggling. Yeah.
Yes.
Process to pay someone else.
Good. Yeah, he would haggle. He was very
Yeah.
good at that.
Haggling.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, shopping for mortgages.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. And it's just business, right? I mean, you might like your bank manager, but your finances are more important.
Yeah, right.
So for Flash. Thank you. Oh, I don't know how.
Low cost vehicle. Gosh. Couple. Low cost.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of these. I know you're not totally finished yet.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me just make people smaller.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so I overheard as some of you were talking, but with your taxes, you can reduce your taxes with RRSPs. Okay, this is from a government program called Registered Retirement Savings Plan. The idea is you put some money each year and you don't pay tax on that money. Then when you retire, you're going in there, this is their teaching. This is not what I believe. Their teaching is when you retire, you have lower income. So then you pull it out at a lower tax rate. Here's my problem with that. If I'm working now and I'm making 30,000 or 50,000 or 70,000, when you retire, do you want to have more money than that or less?
Less.
That's the whole point of working, is to invest so that you have money for your retirement. So the philosophy they're teaching is invest in this, and when you retire, your income is lower and then you can pull it out. But if I'm working my life to invest in money so I have more when I retire, I'm going to actually have more income and I'm going to have to pull out at a higher rate. So this has been promoted, again, by banks and governments for the last 25 or 30 years. It's not a bad thing to have some money in RRSPs, but I would not put a large amount or all of my money there. Some people were saying earlier, don't put your eggs in one basket. Okay, that's a saying that we've learned. So in my opinion, it's okay to have 5 or 10 or 20,000 in here in order to have that as a safety net, but not because then when I retire, I get a lower tax rate. Okay, again, different people have different opinions, that's no problem. But for me personally, if I, rather than get a small amount in my RRSP over 20 or 30 years, I'd rather put it in investments that will pay me more before that and have more money when I retire. Okay, but this does help reduce taxes. Charity donations helps reduce your taxes. So giving to a religious organization or a nonprofit, you can reduce your taxes. And then this is something, so most people that I know, if they don't have much money and they want more money, so I have a job, let's say I'm working at Superstore. If I want more money, most people I know start a second job. That's that's a financially IQ thing not to do. Again, I don't want to use the word dumb or stupid, but why? Because when you're working, I think I have a slide here, but when you're working, well, that one doesn't just explain it clearly. When you're working, your income from work, your taxes from work is the highest amount. So rather than spend your time working during the day at Superstore and in the evenings at a gas station or something to get a bit more money, you're better off to start a small business. And I think everyone should start a small business. So most people say, but Mr. Trevor, I'm not an entrepreneur. Okay, that's no problem. Because in Canada, and this is where it's kind of strange, but I play by the rules, so I'm not doing anything illegal. In Canada, if your business does not make money, you can still claim the expenses and reduce your taxes. You don't have to have a business. Now, if you don't make money for 10 or 20 or 30 years, they're going to say, well, you're not a good business person. But the government knows 90% of businesses go bankrupt in the first 5 years. So just because you have a business, they do not expect that you're going to make thousands and thousands of dollars. But when you start a business, you have all of your business expenses. So I will just preface this by saying, I am not a tax specialist. I am not a tax lawyer, but I file my own taxes, and I used to have a professional do my taxes until I learned what to do myself. So your cell phone can be a business expense 100%. Your food, if you're going out and eating in restaurants for meals, 50% of that, if you're talking about business, can be used to reduce your taxes. A portion of your house that you're using, your vehicle when you use it for business. So when my wife and I, we were in Indonesia, we came back in 2004. I'd been there 5 years. I met my wife there. We married in Indonesia. She got her PR and we came to Canada. In 2004, I set up my first business importing products from Indonesia. I made very little money, but every time I flew to Indonesia, most people spend the money on airplane tickets. That money's gone. Mine's a business expense. I'm going back to a country to look for products to bring to Canada. Think about that for yourselves as well. If you or your family spend money to head back to whichever country, set up some kind of small business, and then when you're traveling there, use the airline expenses. Again, consult a tax professional, but this is the CRA guidelines of what you can and can't do. So every year or two, when we would fly to Indonesia, we couldn't claim our son because he was 2 and 3 and 4 years old at the time. But my wife and my plane ticket was a business expense. So whatever my tax rate was, 15% or 20% that year, I could claim that and get at least some of that money back, etc. Okay, I'll talk for hours about business, so let me move on. But there are ways to reduce your taxes legally. Okay. Yes, yes,
You
Cindy.
mentioned that there's better investments than putting in RRSP.
Yes.
What would that be, or are you going to talk about it?
I may or may not, depending on the time. Let me say this. If I can renovate a house and I buy the house I bought, is that risky or not risky? If I know what's wrong with the foundation, I know to fix it. Is that risky for me or not?
Risky what to do
For me to, so I buy the house that has the foundation that's wrecked. So somebody comes in and says, no, that's risky, it might collapse. I come in and say, oh, it's just this section. Is that a risk for me, or is it very low risk? Low risk. What's the difference between me and person A that saw it and said it's too risky?
No.
Yeah. So I mentioned, I think briefly last week, but I'm setting up a teen mentoring program to teach some of these things and others to teens. But the thing I want to always emphasize to them, your knowledge is what's going to get you ahead. Why do we go to university? Usually we're in university. Yes, we remember, some of the classes, but you're in university to meet with people, to gain knowledge and learn how to interact with other people. I was listening to a seminar today and the person said, 80% of success when you're working is how well you relate to other people. Okay, this is going a little bit away, but so my goal, so for example, with my son, before he was 10, I took him to 9 different countries. Now he's 18 and he's in his 20th country. He's in London right now doing a program. He was in 5 countries from September to December. But I'm not saying that to brag or boast. In the summer times when he was little, until he was grade 12, he went to camp 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. His friends sat at home and played video games. Who has more knowledge of how to interact with people, my son or his friends? Okay.
sorry.
I was very deliberate with my son to learn different things. We went to different countries. We talked about culture. We also had people living with us. From the time he was 4 or 5, we had homestay students. So we had students from Nigeria and Korea and Japan and from Jordan and Saudi Arabia and from multiple countries. He grew up around people from different cultures. If you meet him today, you can chat with him easily because he has the knowledge. Okay. So for me with this, and I'm kind of jumping all over, but the knowledge that you pass on to your kids or how they talk and interact with others, or the knowledge of investments. So let's go back to your question. So if I buy a real estate property and renovate it, I can get between 5 and 20% return on my money. But that's because of the knowledge and the numbers, not because that property says, oh, we're going to, the bank doesn't say, oh, you can get 20% on it or 15. But there's different sections that I can renovate or make changes. So the knowledge I have will make your investments risky or not. Stock market, some people say it's risky, some people say it's not. If you study it and you have knowledge, you're going to lower your risk and get more than 1 or 2 or 5%. Same with real estate, same with business, same with all of these different areas. So for yourselves and for your children, teach them knowledge more than, you know, so I can't say to somebody, for you, go buy real estate. That may not be an area you're knowledgeable about. But for all newcomers, I often say, study about real estate for 6 months or a year. At the very least, you'll make a good purchase when you buy 1 or 2 or 3 houses. Because over your life here, you'll probably buy 1, 2, 5 houses. At least each time you buy, you'll make good purchases. Because that's one of your biggest expenses from that. Okay, I could go into more of this, but I'm conscious of the time and where we're at. Let me just say a couple more things and then we'll kind of close off. So with food, discounts, coupons, shopping around, okay, I often, so on my phone, I don't eat out a lot, but on my phone, I have A&W, I have Tim Hortons, and I have McDonald's apps. So when I'm going there, I've often been with my friend in construction. We drive to McDonald's, he orders whatever. I'm like, oh, do you want to use a coupon? Why? Well, because you just paid $20 and I paid $12 for the same thing. And when you do that once, who cares? But he eats out 3 or 4 times a week, but he's always broke because of how he's spending his money. Discount, somebody said the Flash app, right? So on your phones, I think it's with Superstore, is that right? Yeah. So on your phones, you can get an app and you can buy food at a discount through Superstore. Or there's another one called Reebee, R-E-E-B-E-E, and it shows you the flyers where you can see what the different prices are. So let me just jump down to a quick example here with bread. And I'll close off after this because we'll maybe continue this. Sorry, where did the bread one go? Here it is. So for how much do you usually pay for bread, for a loaf of bread?
$5, I think.
$5? Any other amounts? Okay. So when I'm at Extra Food, Superstore, Walmart, etc., usually I see the price $2.25 up to $4 or $5. I pay $1.50 for the same bread. It's the exact same bread bought by the same company. They go to Dollar Tree and they drop off the bread, and then they go to Walmart or Extra Foods or others and drop off. It's the exact same bread, same company. And some people say, well, I don't want to go just for $1.50 worth of bread. I don't either, but it's next to an Extra Foods. So I go to Extra Foods, which allows me to use my Superstore card. So I'm buying there anyways. I walk across, I buy the bread there. And this by itself, you say, well, Mr. Trevor, you're saving, let's say $1. Well, over a year, I'm saving $100. Who cares? Well, do this with one product. It's not a lot of money. But your eggs, your bread, the things you're buying week after week after week, when I was actively helping people get out of debt, I would look at their money and budget and everything. Usually with most people, I could find $300 or $400 a month if they would rearrange their spending with their debt, their taxes, their income, all of that. they could change and have $300 or $400 every month. Just by like thinking through what they're doing. So that's where, with just how we're spending our money or how we think about it, little changes is where we are like that bucket. We plug up or change a few little things, it will make a difference of hundreds or thousands of dollars each year. Transportation, I can go into talk about that, but let me just say this. Most people think when you come, because of winter, you need a brand new car. If you have a money for a brand new car, go ahead, but you don't. I'm 47 years old and I've never bought a vehicle for more than $10,000. And I've owned 5 or 6 vehicles. I've bought some for $5,000. I bought, the most expensive was $8,000 plus a warranty, etc. But I have some good mechanics. Because most people are like, well, I don't want to buy secondhand. Maybe it'll break down. Well, maybe. But when I've averaged it out, rather than pay 15 or 20 or 30,000, because I've been able to pay and buy cars for just a lower amount and have a good mechanic, I've only spent 1,000 or 2,000 a year on my vehicle expenses. A brand new car, you spend that much just with your insurance costs, usually. Again, this is how I live. And what it's allowed me to do, as I said earlier, is I could take my son to different countries. I could go to places. And I haven't done this on $100,000 a year budget. So I live very low key, but I've been able to travel and do different things with my money. If somebody wants to have a fancy house, big car, whatever, that's fine. That's not, I'm not saying that's a wrong lifestyle, but I've been able to make a lot of choices and do things. And people say, oh, you must be wealthy. No, I've just managed my money in a few different areas to be able to do this. If you and your husband or wife make 100,000 a year and you manage it well, you can become wealthy very quickly, but it's the knowledge that you learn or spend. Okay, and with debt payments, I'm just going to say this and then I'll stop and see, but there's a method called the snowball method to help you get out of debt. I won't go into details, but I can send out more information. There is more information in this PowerPoint. It's already 8:30 and I could talk till 11 or 12 or 1 in the morning, so I need to stop. But are there any quick questions that you might have thought of while I was talking about some of this?
For me, interesting how charity can help us to pay lower taxes.
Okay.
I'm just a newcomer and I don't know about that.
Yeah, no, it's so. I think I heard Erhard. I think you had said, is it 30%?
I thought it
Or
was
about-
30.
Yeah.
About 30.
So when I give money to charity, then that the government looks at that and allows me to have a tax deduction on what a percentage of what I gave. So I'm not sure. Yeah, it might be 30% or 25 or 35. But let's say I give $1,000 to charity. Some of that can go on under my taxes to make my taxes a bit lower. Okay, I can find out more information from the CRA. Now, this is also personal choices. For me, I'm a person who believes I need to give 10 or more % of my money away. Okay, it's from a religious belief that I grew up with, and that I've seen God, when I give money away, God has always given me enough for what I need. Like I said, I've been bankrupt almost twice. I've had issues, but I've always tried to give at least 10% away. So when I'm doing that, yes, it benefits me with taxes, but then it also benefits other people. If I give it to people in other countries, or I give it to shelters or nonprofits here helping homeless people, then I believe that as I help others, then it brings me benefits. One of which is it lowers my taxes a little bit.
33%.
33? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we've looked it up. It's 33% that it can, so you look at your tax amount at the end of the year, and as long as you've donated before December 31st, then you can use some of that money to reduce. Let's say I owe 10,000 in taxes and I gave 1,000 in income or in charity. That means I have $330 that will reduce my 10,000. Some of this is math. It's kind of hard if I'm just talking, but I can write it out or give examples from that. Is this topic something you want to continue next week? Or is this topic something that you're like, nah, that's good enough. Let's move to other things.
Yeah, it's good, great. So, yeah, I want to hear it for next week.
So let's do this, because this was quite a long session and I'm a bit tired. I know some of us are a bit tired with just sitting. And so for next week, we'll continue for about half the class, because next week is going to be our last class. Okay, we're going to,
Oh.
we will have some monthly activities in May, June, July, and August, but next week will be the last class. So for the first half, we'll continue and have some discussion and I'll share some advice. And then for the second half, we'll have some food or snacks and we'll chat. And for those of you online, you'll have to bring your own tea or coffee. But some snacks that we can snack together on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we join in person?
Absolutely. So any of you that are online in Zoom, feel free, if you're in Winnipeg, I mean, if you're in Colombia or Ecuador or some of the other countries, it's harder. But if you are in Winnipeg, feel free. You don't have to just be on Zoom. You can come in person and then you can meet some of the fine volunteers and participants that have come tonight. I think in person, we have people from about 5 different countries, you know, between all of us, 5 or 6. And online tonight, I think we had people from about 7 or 8 different countries. So I'm happy that you guys joined us for this time. Also, you all have my email, not my email, but you have the EAL email when you registered. So if you have other questions about finances, then feel free to send, and I might not answer it immediately, but as soon as I can, within 2 or 3 days, I can try and get answers. And I'll send the PowerPoint for you as well, so that you can have this information, start sharing it with your family, your kids, your friends, etc. Okay.
Thank you.
Now, thank you guys for coming tonight. I hope you have a great night, and we look forward to seeing you next week then if you're able to join.
Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And
Thank you so much.
So interesting.
Bye.
for your
class
Yeah.
and see you next
You.
class.
Bye.
okay, sounds good.
Bye, Orlando.
If you're
Bye.
online, you can also join a breakout room. Let me just, so if you want to just chat with each other for a couple of minutes, you can join and just talk and meet some others. That's your choice. I'll open the room up and you can go in and chat as much as you want with each other for 10 or 15 minutes. But if you have to go, that's no problem. I understand not everyone can stay.